The phone rang at 2:17 a.m. Mark Davis fumbled in the darkness, his heart already racing before he even answered. No good news ever came at this hour. Hello? His voice cracked with sleep and fear. On the other end, his boss, Katherine's voice trembled, something he'd never heard before. Mark, I need you. There's been an accident. Neither of them knew that this desperate middle-of-the-night call would forever alter the carefully constructed walls between their professional and personal lives, transforming a rigid boss-employee relationship into something neither of them had been brave enough to imagine. If you're enjoying this story of unexpected connection and second chances, please hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more heartfelt stories that remind us how life's most difficult moments can lead to our greatest blessings. Mark had been raising his 8-year-old daughter Lily alone for 3 years since his wife's death. Each morning was a carefully orchestrated ballet of making breakfast, packing lunches, and dropping Lily at school before racing to the advertising firm where Katherine Reynolds, brilliant, demanding, and seemingly untouchable, ran the creative department with military precision. The office whispered that she was made of ice, but Mark had occasionally caught glimpses of something else behind her perfect facade, a fleeting sadness in her eyes when she thought no one was looking. Katherine had built her career by never showing weakness. At 38, she'd sacrificed everything for her position: relationships, family, even friendships. Her apartment was immaculate and empty, her schedule meticulously planned. She'd convinced herself this was enough until the night her brother and his wife were critically injured in a car accident 3 states away. With her parents long gone and no one else to call, Katherine's carefully constructed world crumbled as she realized she had no one to turn to, except perhaps the quiet single father, whose work she'd always admired and whose gentle strength she'd secretly envied. When Mark arrived at her apartment that night, he found Katherine pacing, her normally perfect appearance disheveled, her eyes red from crying. "I need to get to Boston immediately. My brother—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Without hesitation, Mark called his neighbor who often helped with Lily, packed an overnight bag for Katherine, and drove her to the airport. As they waited for her flight, she finally broke down. "I don't know how to do this. I've always handled everything alone." Mark recognized the fear in her voice. He'd lived it himself. "You don't have to," he said simply, handing her a tissue. "Not anymore." The next 2 weeks transformed everything. While Katherine stayed in Boston with her brother and sister-in-law, Mark kept her department running smoothly, fielding calls between her and the office. Each evening they spoke, first about work, then gradually about her brother's slow improvement, and finally about themselves. Katherine learned about how Mark had rebuilt his life after losing his wife to cancer, how he'd learned to braid Lily's hair by watching YouTube tutorials, how he still sometimes set the dinner table for 3 before catching himself. In turn, Mark discovered that Katherine's driven perfectionism stemmed from a childhood with parents who had never believed she was enough. He learned that she played the cello but hadn't touched it in years, that she volunteered at an animal shelter every other Sunday, something no one at work knew, and that she was terrified of ending up alone. When Katherine returned to work, something fundamental had shifted. The office noticed immediately how she softened around Mark, how they seemed to communicate without words. When Lily got sick at school, Katherine didn't hesitate to tell Mark to go, covering his presentation herself. When Katherine stayed late working on a crucial pitch, Mark brought dinner for both of them, and they worked side by side until midnight. But transitions are never smooth. Office gossip spread quickly. Some suggested Mark was sleeping his way to a promotion. Others claimed Katherine was showing favoritism. The CEO called Katherine into his office, concerned about appropriate boundaries. That night, Katherine pulled back, telling Mark they needed to be more professional. "This can't work," she said, her walls rebuilding before his eyes. "I'm your boss. There are rules." Mark respected her decision, though it left a hollow ache in his chest. They returned to their formal relationship, the late-night calls and shared confidences becoming a memory neither acknowledged. Lily asked repeatedly why Katherine didn't come over for dinner anymore, and Mark had no good answer. 3 weeks of polite distance followed until the night of the company's annual charity gala. Katherine arrived alone in a midnight blue dress, commanding the room as always. Mark brought Lily, unable to find a sitter. He watched nervously as his daughter, in her favorite party dress, approached Katherine with determined steps. "My dad is sad because he misses you," Lily announced with the brutal honesty only children possess. "And I think you miss him too, because you look at him the same way he looks at pictures of my mom." Katherine knelt to Lily's level, her professional mask slipping. "It's complicated, sweetheart. Grown-ups always say that when they're scared," Lily replied, taking Katherine's hand. "Dad says being brave isn't about not being scared. It's about doing things even when you are scared." That night, after Lily had fallen asleep on a couch in the corner of the ballroom, Katherine found Mark on the terrace. "Your daughter is dangerously perceptive," she said, attempting a smile. "She gets that from her mother," Mark replied, "along with her stubbornness." Katherine took a deep breath. "I've spent my entire life afraid of needing anyone. Then I called you that night and you came. Without question. You saw me at my worst and you didn't run. That terrifies me more than anything." Mark stepped closer. "I know about fear, Katherine. After Sarah died, I was certain I'd never feel anything again except the responsibility of raising Lily. Then one day I realized I was looking forward to going to work, to seeing you. Not because you're beautiful, though you are, but because you challenge me. You make me think. You make me want to be better." "I'm still your boss," Katherine whispered, but the objection sounded hollow even to her ears. "Then fire me," Mark said with a small smile, "or transfer me to another department, or we can figure it out together, like we've been doing with everything else." Katherine's carefully constructed walls finally crumbled completely as she reached for his hand. "I don't know how to do this," she admitted. "Neither do I," Mark confessed. "But I'd like to try if you would." 6 months later, Katherine sat on Mark's couch, helping Lily with her science project while Mark cooked dinner. Her brother and sister-in-law had recovered and were visiting for the weekend. The apartment that had once felt too empty after Sarah's death now buzzed with conversation and laughter. Katherine had restructured the company's departments, eliminating the direct reporting conflict. There had been adjustments. Lily testing boundaries, Mark learning to make space in his life for someone new, Katherine discovering how to balance her career ambitions with her growing love for this ready-made family. "You know," Katherine said that night as they washed dishes side by side, "I used to think vulnerability was weakness, that needing people made you fragile." Mark handed her a plate to dry. "And now?" She looked through the doorway to where Lily was teaching her uncle a complicated hand-clapping game. "Now I think maybe it's the opposite. Maybe being brave enough to need people is the greatest strength there is." One late-night phone call had changed everything, proving that sometimes when we're at our most broken and afraid, we accidentally find exactly what we need. Not in grand gestures or perfect timing, but in the simple courage of reaching out and the even greater courage of someone reaching back. Life doesn't always give us what we want or expect. Sometimes it gives us what we need in the most unexpected packages. A demanding boss, a grieving employee, a precocious child who sees truth more clearly than the adults around her. And sometimes, the family we build from broken pieces turns out stronger than anything we could have planned. As Mark and Katherine's story shows us, the walls we build to protect ourselves often become our prisons. True strength isn't found in perfect independence, but in the courage to be vulnerable, to need others, and to let ourselves be needed in return. Sometimes all it takes is one call in the darkness to change everything, if we're brave enough to answer. 1 year after that fateful late-night call, Mark stood nervously in the small garden behind his house. The space had been transformed, with white chairs, an arch of flowers, and twinkling lights strung through the trees. Lily, now 9, practically bounced with excitement in her lavender junior bridesmaid dress, her hair adorned with tiny white flowers. "Dad, stop fidgeting," she whispered, straightening his tie for the 3rd time. "Katherine says confident men don't tug at their collars." Mark smiled at his daughter. "Is that so? What else does Katherine say?" "That you're the bravest person she's ever met," Lily replied matter-of-factly, "and that I'm the luckiest thing that ever happened to either of you." Before Mark could respond, the music changed. The small gathering of friends, family, and yes, even coworkers, turned to watch as Katherine appeared at the end of the makeshift aisle. Her cream-colored dress was simple and elegant, much like the woman herself, but it was her smile, unguarded and radiant, that took Mark's breath away. Katherine's brother, now fully recovered, walked her down the aisle. As they approached, Mark saw tears in her eyes that matched his own. When she reached him, she took both his hands in hers. "I never thought I'd be here," she whispered, "just for him to hear." "Neither did I," he admitted, "but I can't imagine being anywhere else." The ceremony was brief but heartfelt. When the officiant pronounced them husband and wife, Lily was the first to cheer, rushing forward to embrace them both. The three stood together, arms entwined, as their guests applauded. During the reception, Katherine's brother raised his glass. "To second chances," he said, "and to midnight phone calls that change everything." Later that evening, as the celebration continued around them, Mark and Katherine slipped away to the porch swing, the same swing where they'd had their first real date, where Katherine had first told Lily stories about her own childhood, where Mark had proposed on a snowy evening 6 months earlier. "Mrs. Davis," Mark said, testing the name with a smile. Katherine laughed. "Actually, it's still Miss Reynolds professionally, but Katherine Davis has a nice ring to it for everything else." "Everything else being?" "This," she said, gesturing to the yard where Lily was teaching her cousins a dance. "Family, home, the parts that matter most." Mark took her hand, running his thumb over the new ring on her finger. "You know, when Sarah died, I thought that was it for me. I figured I'd just focus on raising Lily, and that would be enough." Katherine nodded. "And I thought my career was all I needed or wanted." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "We were both so wrong. Gloriously wrong," Mark agreed. As the evening deepened into night, the three of them, Mark, Katherine, and Lily, stood together on the porch, waving goodbye to the last of their guests. Lily yawned dramatically. "Can I stay up a little longer? It's not every day your dad gets married," she negotiated. Katherine laughed. 10 more minutes, then bed. We have a big day tomorrow." Lily's eyes widened. "The surprise! I almost forgot." Mark raised an eyebrow. "What surprise?" Katherine and Lily exchanged conspiratorial glances. "Well," Katherine began, "we may have planned a little something for our first official day as a family." The next morning, Mark found himself being led blindfolded into the spare room that had mostly been used for storage. When the blindfold came off, he gasped. The room had been transformed into a home office for two, with desks facing each other by the window. On one wall hung framed photos: Sarah holding newborn Lily, Mark and Lily at her school play, and a recent picture of the three of them at the lake. On another wall was a large corkboard with Davis Family Adventures written across the top, already dotted with colorful pins marking places they wanted to visit together. "Katherine and I have been working on it for weeks," Lily announced proudly. "Do you like it?" Mark looked from his daughter to his new wife, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gesture. "It's perfect," he managed. "There's one more thing," Katherine said, opening a closet door to reveal a cello case. "I thought maybe I could teach Lily, if she's interested, and perhaps play again myself." "I already had my first lesson," Lily confessed. "I'm not very good yet." Mark pulled them both into a hug, marveling at how life had brought him here, to this moment of perfect contentment he'd never thought possible again. One phone call in the darkness had set everything in motion, proving that sometimes the most beautiful beginnings come disguised as emergencies. That evening, as they sat together on the porch swing watching the sunset, Katherine's phone rang. She glanced at the screen and smiled. "It's work. They can wait until tomorrow." She silenced the phone and slipped it back into her pocket, choosing instead to be present in this moment, with the family she never expected, and the love she'd finally allowed herself to accept. Sometimes the bravest thing we can do is answer the call that comes in the middle of the night. But sometimes, the even braver thing is knowing which calls can wait, because we finally found where we truly belong. If this story touched your heart, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories about love, courage, and the families we create along the way. Remember that your own story is still being written, and sometimes the most beautiful chapters begin with the moments that first appear to be our darkest.